This is Paul Warfield, and you are listening to the Pat Catello Show.
It's the Miami Dolphins Legend Show with Pat Catello. Join us now as we talk Dolphins football, or call in live with your questions or comments. And now, here's your host, Pat Catello.
Okay, joining us now is Hall of Fame member from the 1972 Miami Dolphins and widely regarded as one of the greatest wide receivers ever to play the game. Please welcome Paul Warfield. Paul, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Well, Pat, I'm happy to be on your program, and thanks for the nice intro.
40 years, Paul. 40 years have gone by since the Miami Dolphins created the only undefeated perfect season. Does it get sweeter every year?
I really think it does in many respects, Pat. And when I look back, 40 years is a long time. And such mark that we established, there have been people who have made runs on it, but yet they can't seem to pull together the second perfect season. But it was a special time for the Miami Dolphin organization, and certainly a special time for all of the players who were part of it. And there are a lot of reasons why that happened, but fortunately it happened for all of us, and it's something that we are very proud of.
And, well, you should be. Just an unbelievable accomplishment. Like you said, teams have made runs. Obviously, the closest one was the Patriots, who took an undefeated record right to the Super Bowl. But I guess that's a testament to how hard the achievement really is to do. Now, did you realize you were doing it as the season was going on, or is it something you just look back on?
Certainly I look back on it, Pat, in one respect. And as far as achievement was concerned, it probably happened for a variety of reasons. But I think that it happened primarily because that was not our goal. That was not our objective. The objective of that undefeated, as it turned out, undefeated team was to get back to the Super Bowl after sustaining the year before a humiliating defeat at the hands of the Dallas Cowboys. When we returned to training camp the following year, that was our sole theme, to get back to the Super Bowl, to prove that we were a better football team, not only to our fans in Miami, but to the football world in this country. The most important thing that one team or organization can never lose sight of, it's nice to have that credential, that extra credential that we have and no one else has accomplished, but if a team gets to the Super Bowl and they don't win it, who remembers that team? And even the New England Patriots, who put together that amazing streak of 18-0, are people talking about the New England Patriots today? No. Everything rides on the Super Bowl. So we were locked into that one goal and that one focus. And a wonderful thing happened along the way. We won all of our ball games. But once we got to that ball game, that was the game that we had looked for all year, the game that we had planned for all year. And our intention was to play the best ball game that we possibly could and come out as winners.
Very interesting perspective on it, and I've interviewed and talked with various members, and it's funny, they all seem to have the same kind of approach and say the same kind of thing, that, it was that loss to Dallas, that they basically were just so determined to win the Super Bowl, and they didn't really think of it more than a game-to-game thing. Now, you were originally an NFL guy. You come to Miami in the first official year of the merger. What was your feeling on that? I mean, did you still have an NFL mentality? Obviously, Shula comes to the AFL Dolphins, which are now merged. What was your feeling on that?
Well, I came in 1970, and although there was an upset in Super Bowl before that with Joe Namath and the Jets, and I believe Kansas City may have won a Super Bowl.
Right.
The perspective in the football world was that the American Football League was inferior in terms of overall quality and depth of talent, comparatively speaking, to the National Football League. And perhaps that may be true. That's for argumentation, whether you're an old AFL fan, an NFL fan, or vice versa. But I guess I would probably think when I came down, let me just give you this quick example.
Sure.
I had no idea that months earlier, when I was preparing to go to I didn't know it was my final training camp with the Cleveland Browns during the 1969 season. I picked up an edition of Sports Illustrated magazine that was highlighting the teams in both the AFL and the NFL on the year before the merger would fully take place in 1970. And so I'm thumbing through page after page, looking at what the writer, I believe the late Tex Maul, had to say about all of the teams in the NFL, and I was familiar with that league. And so just out of inquisitiveness, I said, I'm going to thumb through a few more pages to see what Mr. Maul has to say about this AFL, because I was totally unfamiliar with that league and its players for the most part. I hadn't played against any of them. And so as I'm thumbing through I come across a page that says the Miami Dolphins, and its headline, the worst team in pro football. Now, I had no idea that months later, maybe 7 to 9 months later, when they held the draft in 1970, that I would be traded to the Miami Dolphins from Cleveland. And Cleveland, of course, would get their first-round pick and select a quarterback. So all of a sudden, beyond 9 months later, when they finally opened their training camp, I am physically in that environment with that ball club, and comparing it to the clubs that I had in Cleveland, it certainly didn't measure up at all.
Wow, that's an interesting perspective. Never heard you say that before. So now you come there. Obviously, you knew Don Shula, and that was his first year as well. What was the relationship right off the bat with that?
Well, when I finally arrived at training camp, and I was a late addition to training camp. Ironically, I was in a little bit of a contract dispute, but we were able to resolve it. And I remember the evening that I arrived, he called me into his office immediatly and expressed to me, he was an old NFL guy, and, of course, I had played in the NFL, how much he was going to depend on, my contribution, which I was glad to hear, although, a lot of things were going on in my mind. Now for 6 years of my career, I'd been with a championship organization, played in an NFL championship game in which the Browns had won, and I'd made up my mind that, I was going to a ball club that wouldn't be certainly as good as Cleveland, but I was going to be fully committed to helping them go wherever they could go. And I knew about Don's success, and even as a young coach with Baltimore, he had quickly risen to nearly the top of the ladder with only Vince Lombardi, who's probably standing above him. There were other great coaches, certainly in the NFL, George Allen. I played at Cleveland with Blanton Collier, who's, in my mind, a great coach, and so there are a number of others. But this young guy at that point in his career had a meteoric rise nearly to the top and had done great things with Baltimore. So I felt very good about being associated with him, and I certainly thought that if he was as good as the record indicated, that, things would turn around, and hopefully quickly, in Miami. Now, and just add to that, they turned around much quicker, which is an indication of his greatness as a head coach.
Absolutely. And now that 72 team, certainly a team that, for all their accomplishments, one could say, kind of doesn't get the respect in a lot of circles that they deserve. What's your feeling, on that? I always bring up the example that, even in 1972, the Dolphins did not have everything laid out, a perfect record going into the playoffs, and you find yourself going to Pittsburgh to play a championship game on the road, more or less a team that just had an immaculate reception and is riding, a wave going into that. that. Just a testament to how good you guys really were. Do you feel you guys get the respect around the country or the league that you should?
No, I don't. I'll say quite candidly, and there's a tendency by people in this generation who look back and, for example, in looking at our schedule, they said that our schedule was not one that was that highly competitive in the number of teams that had losing records. And let me just say this. When we went into that season, as I indicated to you beforehand, Coach Tushula was talking to the ball club in sort of a state-of-the-state meeting about where we needed to go after the humiliating defeat at the hands of the Cowboys. And he told us very candidly, and I think our first 4 games, we played against teams going into that season who were considered to be contenders to go to a Super Bowl. You know, now as the season wore on, only one of those teams finished with a winning record. But let me just sort of set that stage for you, if I can, very quickly.
Sure.
We opened up the season against the Kansas City Chiefs. Right. They had been a previous Super Bowl winner 2 years before. Their team was intact, and I will say this was the same team that we had played only months earlier on a Christmas Day in the longest game that was a tremendous team in terms of talent offensively and defensively.
Right.
And we were very fortunate to beat them. I thought personally, if you talk to any of my former teammates, we felt that they were better than us. Somehow or another, we hung in that ball game. We came out the victor, and then went on to represent the AFC, in the Super Bowl. But we were playing them in the first game, and they were opening up the new Arrowhead Stadium. What would be a better occurrence for them being knocked out by a team that they weren't supposed to be knocked out about? They still had this great team with a number of Hall of Famers who would be Hall of Famers on defense and offense, and now they're in their brand spanking new building, and you've got this young upstart team coming in to play them on their home ground. Couldn't be a better setting. We beat them in Kansas City. We were a better team than we were months earlier, and we beat them in Kansas City. We had to play against the New York Jets, and Namath was coming back for the first time after being injured the year before. And they still had the team from '68, was intact with the great running combination of Snell and Boozer and a good defense and Joe Namath. We had to play them. I believe we played them in New York at Shea Stadium. Mm-hmm. We beat them there. Then we came home to play against a Houston Oilers team that was not very good and was not considered to be a contender or more or less a second division team, and so we beat them. But the following week, we had to travel to Minnesota to play the Minnesota Vikings, and they had that great defense with the Purple People Eaters and play them there. We played 3 legitimate contenders early in the year, in the first month, and we beat them all. We beat Minnesota in a tough game up there by 2 points. Now, we talked about that even in the State of the Union message with Don Shula leading the way. We knew what the demands were on our schedule, and we kind of felt like, well, at least I kind of felt like, looking at that schedule, if we can come out of that, 2-2, we'll be in good shape. If we can come out of there possibly 3-1, man, that's maybe. So we came out 4-0, and that was sort of the start, and we just kept going, and we played it, using that old cliche, one game at a time, never getting ahead of ourselves, but always the focus and thought in our mind, we're going to get to the Super Bowl. We're going to get to the Super Bowl. So today I'll just say that when a team runs off 6 or 8 straight wins during the regular season, the national media is at the doorstep. In those days, you got to remember, ESPN hadn't even been organized yet, and so our national media, we were only followed basically by the newspapers in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, those newspaper men and local broadcasters. So let me leave you this last point. we're up to 11 wins in the season. I believe it's about 11 wins or thereabout. And we go in, and I think when they were on the schedule, the New York Giants, to play the Giants. And not until we played the Giants did the national media and most folks around the country, it was almost like the national media, the New York media said to themselves, you know something? These guys are undefeated. And then people started to pay a little bit of attention, but not like anything today. As I say, when a team runs off 8 straight victories, everybody, all the satellite trucks and everything is out there. So, perhaps that's a measure of how difficult it is to attain that elusive goal of a complete undefeated season. In that we didn't have certainly many of the distractions that these young men are faced with today, and we're able to really keep our focus.
Right. What an interesting perspective, and you're absolutely right. The road, even from day one for this team to accomplish that is just tremendous. And, of course, we've said this is the 40th anniversary of the perfect season of 1872. And are you looking forward to seeing your old teammates?
Anxious to see my former teammates again. I'm so proud of all of them and what we were able to accomplish. And it just goes to show you when you have an objective and a goal and you have people willing to make sacrifices for that goal, that wonderful things can be accomplished. And
even you talked earlier about the NFL and the reputation that it had. Certainly, that was in part to players such as you. You're one of the best wide receivers ever to play professional football and always a class act. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us tonight, Paul. Thank you so much.
Well, Pat, thank you so very much for having me on your broadcast.
My best to you, and we'll see you soon.
Hey, this is Dan Marino.
Hi, this is Larry Zonka.
Hi, I'm Zach Thomas of the Miami Dolphins.
Yo, what's up? This is Tyreek Hill of the Cheetah.
This is Mark Super Duper.
I'm John Offerdahl.
This is Paul Warfield.
Hi, this is Nick Bonacani. This is Jake Scott.
Gary Premian.
Dick Anderson.
Larry Little.
Mercury Morris.
Tom Vigorito.
This is Don Strock.
Don Nottingham.
Hey, this is AJ Duay.
This is Mark Ingram.
And Jim Crash Jensen.
This